right, welcome to Lunar Alchemy. Nice to see all of you here. Thank you for joining us. Hello, Bella. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi, John.
um, so, this week is a really interesting sort of evolution from where we've been and where we're going in this process as we move around the calendar and the sun makes its way through all of the various positions. We get to look at the energies that uh, are about letting go of living and dying and explore how those shadow frequencies come into our experience through the influence of the moon and the lunar cycle. We just had a new moon on this previous Monday or Sunday rather. So uh, we're in a new cycle, and I'm excited about what this new cycle, starting off with this transit, what it might have to bring.
Yeah, I've felt all the energies in Aries for a while now, and I did feel on Sunday that kind of the air was vibrating. Kind of if you have, when you have a fire and you look at the air right over it, you can see how the air is doing this. And that's what the energy felt like having a new moon in Aries, the first one of the year, with so many other planets right there, has I feel like in all of us that thunder energy that we were speaking about with the 51 has, yeah, and I think that it has initiated things in us that sometimes we don't even know what it is. And I know that you and I behind the scenes were a little bit speaking about identity as well, and I do feel like the 42 is its endings, so there might be nuances of your identity or even like layers of identity or even personas or roles that are leaving. And what I feel as I'm saying that is that where we have the earth right now is in the 32, which is fear of failure, and the shadow of the 42 is expectations. So there, here I feel like it's so important to not get the mind in the way for what needs to die, because the mind can say no, but I need I need to stay here, I need to still be this, I still need to have this job that gives me a lot, at least this kind of income that has me pay the car every month, like all the turns that the mind can tell you that you shouldn't let something die. That is for me very much what's in the transits right now. And the moon is in the second gene key, so it's really about coming back into the earth and knowing that the answers are not really up here, but they're much more in the roots of the tree.
Mm. Yeah, really, really interesting to think about how where the sun and the moon are in relationship to our galactic calendar. It's the beginning of it's springtime, which means, the sign of Aries. It's the first sign in our zodiac. And as you were mentioning, this past Sunday was the first new moon of that zodiac year. We hadn't had a new moon yet. So it's very interesting that this transit is focusing in that direction of this process of grasping and um, attempting to exit before completing our processes, our cycles. These are kind of the ways this energy shows up, and giving us the opportunity to explore the possibilities of detachment. What is a possibility in living when we're no longer grasping too tightly or pushing away and resisting the movements and changes that are occurring? And it seems significant to me. I've been in this process of looking at lunar alchemy as a process for spiritual evolution, I've been looking at what are the forces that the moon has on our life. How does this relationship between the earth and the moon, what is that aspect that the moon is carrying that is analogous for us? And oftentimes what you were bringing up and what you were just sharing is these sort of cycles of the mind that are unable to let go. And what that made me aware of or think about is really the process and the role of our personality ego structure, that when we think about who we truly are and the possibility that we could transcend or destroy or somehow move into a relationship with our ego that allows us to be more truly and authentically who we really are, we have to look at, well, what is the role of our mind in this process of grasping and resisting? What is going on there? And it, to me, it's like this movement of life that is essential for us for our survival. You know, the ego is always focused upon survival, no matter what the situation is. It's always trying to solve that problem, maybe to our detriment, but it keeps going on and on and on, even once we've fulfilled its desire or its need of the moment. And so when we're looking at this possibility of letting go, of transcending, of moving beyond, of this sort of big picture of a spiritual process, it feels it feels very significant that here we are in the first new moon cycle. So if you think of the cycles of the mind and the cycles of the moon as being a similar kind of process, when you have a new moon, it's an opportunity to create a new cycle, to choose a different placement of our focus. And that combination with the possibility of working with expectation and of letting go and of moving into the next phase, it feels very potent to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel right now there is a lot of, I actually would like to bring up to kind of just give, because some people are like more visual than auditory. So I would just like to bring up a snapshot of where we
Yeah,
are.
let's
And
look at that.
some days in the year are what we call reflector days, where all the center is going to be white, because there's never going to be anywhere in the chart where you have a hanging gate on one side and then a hanging gate on the other side so that they meet. So there are days where there is no definition. And right now we have, just by these 13 activations on this side, we actually have 4 defined centers. And for a long time now, we had Saturn and Jupiter that were forming this channel. Now we don't have the 1949. We spoke about it, I think, last week, as that kind of needy energy, the emotional energy that is connected to that ego that you're speaking about. Still, though, we do have a lot more on this emotional side, the abstract side, and that has been the theme for the whole year, whether we're looking at the year that we have in the eastern, like the Western calendar, or we see the Chinese New Year that is a few weeks in the year. And now we've had astrological New Year on the 21st, 22nd of Mars, and then the new moon. It's like almost like 4 different beginnings that we've had since January 1st. And
Uh-huh.
in all those beginnings, it has been a lot of this side of the body graph. And if you think about your own body, because I love to, feel the energy in our body, what we can, perceive and feel is that the left side is the more feminine, is the shadow that's maybe more connected to pain and suffering, and then the right side is, and it's more passive, can kind of collapse into the wound. And then we have the right side that is more about solutions, that is more in a way instinctive, which is the same in the body graph, and that might, kind of judge and run away from the thing. So to see that there is a lot on this emotional side, there's a lot of emotional alchemy happening, and a lot of possibilities of actually staying with it, because we can speak a lot about transcending and going beyond. And there's also, like, you can only go so far. In a way, you can absolutely get to know spirit and have spirit move through you when you transcend and go beyond. And at the same time, that's just half of the truth of who we are, because we also have the depth of the soul and the roots of the tree, and the more feminine aspect, the earth. We have the earth and we have the sky. That's the whole thing. That's the binary code of the universe. That's what the I Ching is, the yin and the yang. So I feel like we are shown to work with the more emotional feelings, is the higher frequency of that compass, that is more the divine feminine. And emotions that, more kind of pull on us, is when the ego attaches an opinion, you could say, about that feeling, and then it becomes charged, and it becomes, so there is something with that. As we have the emotional center defined, we have channels to the throat, our expression. Mercury is in the 51, so still this kind of fiery expression that's been there for a while. And yeah, I feel today that it's an opportunity to feel into the energy of the new moon and where we are, and say, do you have a preference when it, whether it is transcending and go to spirit, or it is transmuting, transforming in kind of the burning place of the fire and the earth. And if you have a preference, maybe look at the other side, because sacred union comes when we can look at feminine and masculine, when we can look at earth and sky, and we can actually merge them inside ourselves. So that's what, this snapshot kind of, in me, what it's awakening.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that we can, as a human being, we can relate to ourselves in a variety of different ways. We can see ourselves as a spiritual being with a body, or we can live our lives completely as a physical entity there, as if there is no um, sort of transcendent energetic quality to who we are. We're like a mechanical effect of the biology that we're composed of. And when we're looking at this idea of lunar alchemy, if we're looking at that mechanical effect as sort of that's like what manifests an ego, an ego personality process. And when we look at the spiritual possibilities that are an integration of that which is sort of beyond our current capability of awareness, when we look at those two things, is there a way that we can mold them together? Can we use the ego as the driver of a process of expanding our awareness to encompass that which is greater? And and we can do that too. We can see ourselves as a transformational being that is a possibility of the meeting point of these aspects that we have. Can we expand into the cosmic? Can we express those tendencies or those desires or those processes in the earthly expressions that we have in the way that we relate to our food, our relationships with nature and other people, and all of the things that make human life what it is. Can we become a transformational process rather than just an identity of something that we've grasped onto, that or that we've tried to let go of entirely, to if we're swinging in the other direction, how can we become a transformational process? and and I feel like this particular gene key has, this 42, this shadow of expectation, has a lot to do with those different choices and where it might lead us.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna maybe bring up the 64 doors because I feel
Yeah.
there is a beauty as well in this. I think we call it the nomad, and the nomad
Mhm.
doesn't really have an end point. It's a constant transformation, and I can see an elder or like a wanderer, if that's a word. Somebody who
Mhm.
walks and who is gonna need many different pairs of like sandals in his or her life because it's a continuous journey, and there are going to be cycles. So one cycle is spring becomes summer, becomes fall, becomes winter. That these are cycles, and it's not like as humans, because we are part of this organic earth. Like we are men, we're animals, we're minerals. Like we are part of this ecosystem. We don't just get to decide, okay, now winter is over. And I feel like the whole illusion maybe of free will is that we have like the whole focus on being very individualistic is like we have stopped many times to wait out the cycles. We are just like taking a flight somewhere, and maybe the situation in the world right now is not really allowing us to kind of escape from things, because sometimes it is good to wait something out. There are processes of
Mm.
dying, there are processes of birthing that you don't just get to snap your fingers and then it's done. Like any woman who ever had a child knows that, or anybody who was in a hospice with somebody that was dying. It's not a snap of fingers. Like the organic life has a process of birthing and of dying, and that is really, really profound. And like for myself, I feel like the dying has been in a way pushed away. Like we have really been good at, in a way, masking the dying. And there's something with that is taking away that organic process of allowing things to die and being okay with it. Because if the only thing we see is like, starting new and starting new, there is an imbalance
Mm.
that I can feel.
Yeah, and that, um yeah, I'd love, I don't know if you wanted to show anything particular from the 64 doors. I love that it incorporates these archetypes that are essentially a full expression of the the spectrum of each gene key, that incorporates the shadow, the gift, and the city, that transcended energy. And when you look at this idea of, you know our ego, our lower, our body function is designed so that we're always seeking something new. If we eat the same thing every single day, our impulses are going to guide us to try something different over time. And and at the same time, we may develop patterns of living to where the uncertainty that we experience on a day-to-day basis makes, um, choosing a pattern of sameness, the familiar, as being the only thing that can be comfortable. And this, like you said, this process of birthing and dying, they are processes that occur in their own time, on life's own time, not in a way that we decide it's going to show up. And this is really interesting in today's context of where spiritual community seems, at least in the Western world, as far as I can tell, is kind of exploding on in this virtual environment of being able to connect to anybody on the planet and do these virtual summits and spreading practices of meditation or processes where oftentimes the primary goal of these processes is to be able to bend life's processes to fit the desires of our mind. It's like, have you mastered the law of attraction yet? No. Well, be on my webinar and I'll show you how and why it's not working for you. Um, and it's almost as if this possibility of living life and what is really exhibited by this archetype of the nomad that you've identified in the 64 doors, you know, of not being attached to any outcome and accepting each moment as a new possibility for adventure, no matter what is brought in that moment. And it's interesting that you're pointing out that there's this emotional focus going on because human emotions are so variable from moment to moment. And even though our day-to-day lives may be very, very similar, we may follow the same physical routines of waking up at the same time, doing the same things each day, going to the same places. Our emotional experience is in a state of constant transformation, even if those transformations are guiding us along these really well-traveled pathways where we fall into the same patterns of feeling irritated by the same types of things, or feeling excited or happy about the same types of possibilities. You know, even for someone who's living a primarily maybe a non-spiritual life, who goes to work every day 5 days a week and looks forward to the weekend so that they can either, you know, do their hobby where they have the free time to go do their hobby, or for some people it's just that they get to party on the weekend, you know, with their friends or whatever it is. These emotional patterns that we have, even when they're well established patterns that we do over and over again, within each expression of these patterns, we're always having this variability and the possibility to really find the adventure in each moment. You know, we can live our lives in kind of a static manner by by being guided by our expectations. But when we let go of those expectations and allow ourselves to truly experience each moment with courage, it suggests huge possibilities for what we can choose in our next moment, rather than being stuck in these processes that are well worn and maybe even over time become boring for us. You know, we can find nuances to our experience that we haven't had before that may lead us to a new possibility for making new choices, or and in those cases that might be in processes of letting go of old things and how we choose to be with the things that are in a process of um, rather than expansion, of contracting or of diminishment or of dissipation. How do we be with those things as we allow that process to occur?
Mhm. Yeah, I couldn't help by bringing this up because I felt like you were speaking to this. And I mean, I don't feel like this person is kind of staying in the mundane. And one way of not being able to do everything the same every day is to be nature. And I've seen
Mhm.
that for good and for bad by being in Florida, where people drive everywhere. And you don't really have to be in many cities in Europe, like in Paris, you can't. I mean, you can have a car, but it's more a hassle than anything else. If you take the metro, you're going to get faster to places. And then you are going to have to meet and feel that collective energy in the morning where everybody's rushing somewhere. So here in one way, you can be a bit more sovereign because you don't have to mix your energy in that sense. And in another way, like you say, you can kind of create your comfort zone and stay in there and do everything. Like seasons are not really changing, and it can be a way of staying your sovereignty and being centered, but it can also be a bit of an escape or a bypassing of things that are actually here to bring us, to kind of have us remember our wound and what the soul came here to transform in this lifetime.
Mm.
So it's both and what I, with this image, which is the main image for the nomad, it's also remembering that whatever is alive now, it's a cycle of life and death. It's an ecosystem. So that's where I was speaking about. I think I did it last week too, like preference. When you see that you have a preference, there's often a attachment, to an outcome, or there is a you can be attached to just feel good feelings. So when we are in those emotional times, that is something that you can. It's always showing us something. When we have a preference, and that means that there's something that we don't really like, that's often a place to look at, and we can look back at tracking in our lives probably a lot of similar situations.
Mm. I think that that image I love this image as well. Um, but the image with the feet walking, and you see all of these are like the flowers of spring and the new life. And it's very easy to be engaging in the process of the new without recognizing the what is underneath it that gave birth to those things. Here, sort of metaphorically speaking, here it has the skeleton just beneath the surface. And I love that in this it shows both the roots and the worms that are doing this sort of transformational process to give availability for this life. And the person walking, I sort of imagine it as a female, probably because of the blue toenails. um, I've known a few men who actually paint their toenails those types of colors as well, but um, she's walking on her tiptoes as if filled with a lightness, you know. And when we think about the processes of endings, of things dying, of completions, oftentimes we don't carry that same degree of lightness with us when we consider ending a period of experience that has been joyful or meaningful for us. We often feel the heaviness in our feelings of the the hole that will be left when that ending is completed. And to me, what this image suggests is that this archetype that is being suggested is the nomad understands the ground that she's walking on. she understands that nothing new exists in the world except by the ending and completion of things that have been through their own cycle.
Mm.
And to be able to kind of dance with this process of life in that way, it means that any, when we talked last week about thunder and this shock that can occur, you know, every moment, whether we feel shocked by it or not, holds both of these possibilities in it at once. And the ability to dance with it, to move lightly with it, is what allows our lives to transform into something magical
And I would
rather
like,
than having it be just a focus on, okay, what's new or what's good or what's joyful or what's light. When we have all of it together, then we get to access that almost undefinable aspect of life that makes each moment magical.
exactly. And just to add to that, the mind is not dense. So the mind, and it can even be the higher mind. I'm not saying mind is something negative. The mind is going to prefer lightness because it
Mm,
is transcending and it's becoming more of its higher self, and that it's coming closer to spirit to allow spirit to move through us. So mind is usually preferring that lightness. And at the same time, there is another aspect that has to do with the soul. And the soul is denser because the soul is in the body and the body is denser. It's just the nature of what it is. And also knowing though that in the earth, if we know the earth, there is magma, there is this like fire inside the earth. So there is a power of transformation inside the earth. And if we just prefer the lightness, that's fire, power of transformation, the lightness inside that depth of the soul, we miss that, and at the end of the day, we want to taste that as well, and be able to hold that, because when we hold the soul completely and the spirit completely, like that is the sacred union, like you're saying, of all of it. So it's lightness might feel for the mind like it's better, but the soul probably knows that there is something extremely powerful with that power of fire in the middle of the earth, if we dare
mhm,
to go there. And many of us, we don't dare to go there, or we and that's when the ego kind of makes us escape, or the shadow comes in and says, I'm going to keep you fragmented, I don't want you to merge those fundamental parts of your being.
mm. Yeah, yeah. So at this point, I want to thank everybody for joining us on Facebook. If you're watching, look in the comments. If you're interested in engaging in the lunar alchemy process with our other members, um, one thing that you may have caught on about our current conversation around what's going on in this transit is the processes of life that we relate to from some Eastern traditions as the development of karma in our lives, and how to transcend that, move beyond it, to utilize it as a force for transforming our lives into something that can become more fulfilling. um, and that's where I'd love to steer our conversation now, and that in this direction, because of how this shadow of expectation kind of really moves our karma in a new direction. And then we'll be able to experience a quantum healing transmission, um, to to help reorganize our energies, to move with lightness, with our karma, and with the inevitable cycles of life that include both new births as well as the endings and completions of death in our experience. So great. Let's